everybody. So today we'll talk about the spinal cord. You know that central nervous system consists of the brain and the spinal cord. So this is the brain and this is the spinal cord. And if you see the spinal cord from outside, it is a cord-like structure that descends from the brain and passes through the vertebral canal. So inside the vertebral column, you have a canal, and the spinal cord passes through it. First, we'll see the anatomy of the spinal cord. That means the structure, outside and inside. Then we'll talk about the spinal nerves. From the spinal cord, 31 pairs of nerves arise, and those are called the spinal nerves. How many? 31 pairs. Okay? Of spinal nerves arise from the spinal cord. So we'll see how the spinal nerve originates from the spinal cord. If you cut the spinal cord and see inside, what you will see the bundle of fibers. Those are called the tracts. Bundle of fibers called the tracts. Several, a number of bundle of fibers. Some of those bundle of fibers are going upwards, that means taking the signal to the brain, and some of those tracts or bundle of fibers take the signal out from the brain. So ascending and descending. Ascending tracts take the signal to the brain, descending tracts take the signal away from the brain, out from the brain. So two types of tracts we see inside the spinal cord. So we will talk about that. And the tracts, ascending tracts carry sensory signals. So that's why they are called sensory or ascending tracts. Okay? And descending tracts carry motor signal. So they are also called motor tracts or descending tracts. So two types of tracts, ascending or sensory, descending or motor. Now, when the signal, for example, this is your skin. From the skin, when the signal is taken to the brain, like if I touch the skin, you know that the touch signal is taken from the skin to the brain. Through which tract? Ascending or descending? Ascending. That means sensory, right? Sensation. Touch, pain, temperature, those sensations go to the brain, right? So when that signal travels to the brain, in some locations, the signals are relayed. That means one group of neurons take the signal from here to here, for example. Another group of neurons will take the signal from here to here. Another group will take from here to here. Because, for example, if I touch here, your brain is far away from here, right? So one neuron is not that long to carry the signal all the way to the brain. Does it make sense? So that's why you need a number of relays Have you seen relay race? One person runs, right? Then gives the stick to next person, then he runs up to a certain distance. So same way, if I touch here, the signal will be taken by one group of neurons and will be given to next group of neurons or set of neurons to carry up to certain distance. Then we'll hand over to another group of neuron to take all the way to the brain, right? That is called sensory relay. So we'll see how that happens. Same way, when the brain sends motor command through the descending or motor tracts, some locations, relay take place. So we'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about the spinal cord trauma or injury to the spinal cord. What can happen? So first, the location. Spinal cord starts here, where you have the foramen magnum. You all know in the bottom of the skull you have seen the big foramen, that is the foramen magnum, right? So that is where the spinal cord starts, the upper end. And lower end is at lumbar 1 most of the time. Sometimes it goes a little bit more down to lumbar 2. So most of the cases lumbar 1, sometimes it extends down to lumbar 2 vertebrae, okay? And the length of the spinal cord in an adult person is about 18 inches. That means 45 centimeter long and half inch or 14 millimeter wide. So the length is 18 inch and half inch wide. I have already mentioned the function. How many types of tracts? Inside 2, right? Ascending and descending. That means sensory and motor, right? So two-way communication occurs by the spinal cord, in the spinal cord. So ascending or sensory and descending or motor. Two-way communication that I have already explained. Now, your spinal cord is a very important and sensitive structure. Therefore, it is heavily protected. Heavily protected. So, you know that the spinal cord is located inside the vertebral column. So, this is, oh. Okay. So, you know, this is the vertebral column, okay, and inside the vertebral column you have a canal, vertebral canal. So spinal cord is located inside the vertebral canal. That means the bones, vertebrae protect the spinal cord. Then around the spinal cord you have 3 coverings. Those are called meninges. How many? 3. So you see it is heavily protected. So 3 layers or coverings around the spinal cord. The outermost one is the thickest one. That is called the dura mater. So 3 meninges, and outermost one is the thickest one, toughest one. That is called the dura mater. So this is dura. And then middle one is called the arachnoid. Arachnoid matter. And innermost one is thin and attached to the spinal cord. That is the pia mater. Okay, so those are three meninges are covered. Okay, these three are called meninges. Outermost is the dura, middle one is the arachnoid, and innermost one, which is attached to the spinal cord, that is the pia mater. Okay. Now, there is another thing present around the spinal cord. In between the arachnoid and pia, you have fluid. So here, under the arachnoid matter, you have a fluid, and that fluid is called cerebrospinal fluid, or CSF, cerebrospinal fluid, in subarachnoid space. Sub means under the arachnoid matter. That means between arachnoid and pia. And that also provides protection. Make sense? So, you know, around the spinal cord, three layers, right? And in between arachnoid and pia, you have also a fluid, right? So that helps a lot. Like, you know, when you move your body, like suddenly you break your car, right? If there was no fluid there, then what would have happened? The spinal cord would hit the bone. Same thing in your brain. Around your brain, you have that fluid, cerebrospinal fluid, right? So when you ride the roller coaster in Six Flags, right? You know, suddenly moves. If you did not have that fluid, then the brain would have hit the hard skull. And you know, brain is soft and sensitive, right? So that would cause the damage of the brain, right? But that is prevented by that fluid. Is it clear? So, very important. So, now if I ask you, from outside to inside, outermost protection is what? The bones. Which bones? Vertebrae. Is it clear? Vertebrae. Then you have how many meninges? Three. Dura, arachnoid, pia, right? And you also have fluid. Now, the last one. You also have fat around the spinal cord. So fat also provides protection. And fat is located in epidural space. That means between the bone, if this is the bone and this is the dura mater, you have fats here. Between the bone and the dura mater. That is called epidural fat. So those are the protections of the spinal cord. Around your brain, you have same structures. You have bone, the skull bone. You have three meninges, dura, arachnoid, pia. You have cerebrospinal fluid. But one thing is absent around the brain. That is the epidural fat. It is only present around the spinal cord, but not around the brain. Okay, so remember that. Now you see again, this is the bone, and then the epidural fat, then dura mater, arachnoid mater, pia mater. You see, pia is attached to the spinal cord. This is the spinal cord. Okay, this is a transverse section. Now, external features of the spinal cord. If you see the spinal cord from outside, you'll see few things. First, in two locations, the spinal cord is slightly expanded, wider in two areas, two locations. One is in cervical area here, and another is in the lumbar area. Make sense? So that's why they are called cervical and lumbar enlargements. slightly wider here and here. That's the good question. Okay, so why in this area the spinal cord is bigger, wider, and in this area it is wider? The reason is, you know, the spinal cord receives the nerves. Receives the nerves, right? And more nerves are received by this part of the spinal cord and this part of the spinal cord. Why? Because from your upper limbs, many nerves enter into this part of the spinal cord. Make sense? So you need more neurons there to receive the signal. Does it make sense? And from your lower limbs, from your legs, a lot of nerves enter into the spinal cord. And that's why in lumbar area it is expanded too. Expansion means more neurons, right? To process the or receive the signal. Now, let me draw here. So this is the spinal cord, a little bit enlarged in cervical, and then another enlargement in lumbar, then it goes down like this, and the lower end of the spinal cord is cone shaped like this. So this is cervical enlargement, this is lumbar enlargement, and this is the lower end of the spinal cord, which is cone shaped, and that's why this part is called conus medullaris. Cone shaped lower end of the spinal cord. Okay.
The spinal cord extends through the sacrum.
No, I told you before, it starts here at foramen magnum and ends at lumbar 1 most of the time. Sometimes it goes a little bit longer, L2. Is it clear? So ends here, not goes.
No, because the picture confused me. I could see like.
Yeah, actually the spinal cord ends here. Okay. This is not a good picture. Okay. If you look carefully, the spinal cord ends here. This is the cone-shaped lower end. Okay. But a lot of nerves are going down.
Oh.
But, so this is lumbar 1 or lumbar 2. Make sense? So conus medullaris. Now, from the lower end of the spinal cord, many spinal nerves arise and form horse tail-like structure that is called chordae equinae. Okay. So chordae equinae is a bunch of spinal nerves. Okay, a bundle of spinal nerves. Looks like horse tail of the horse. Okay. Now, see another structure which is a thin cord connects the lower pointed end of the spinal cord to the coccyx. You know the bone coccyx, the tailbone. So this thin cord is called phylum terminale. So phylum terminale is a thin cord that goes from the lower end of the spinal cord to the coccyx. This is the tailbone coccyx. Okay. So this is phylum terminale. Now, you know 3 meninges. Innermost one is attached to the spinal cord. I mentioned it. So that is what? The pia mater. So this is the pia mater, innermost meninges. And from pia mater, a number of ligaments arise. So these are the ligaments, and they go to the dura mater. They pass through the arachnoid and get attached to the outermost layer, that is the dura. And this is pia. So these ligaments arise from the pia mater, and other end is attached to the dura mater. And these are called denticulate ligaments. Denticulate ligaments. Okay? Just to keep the spinal cord in right location inside the vertebral column. Make sense? Otherwise, it will move too much. It's like basically tying. Is it clear? Also, the lower end is tied to what? The coccyx, right? By phylum terminal. So, the lower end will not move too much. Make sense? Like it is tied to the coccyx. So, that is the external of the spinal cord. So, how many enlargements? How many enlargements? Two. One is in cervical, another is in lumbar area. And you know why, right? Then the lower end of the spinal cord ends at which vertebral level?
L1.
L1, sometimes L2. Most of the time L1, right? So it doesn't go all the way down. Is it clear? Okay. That's why, you know, we do lumbar puncture. What is that? We collect the cerebrospinal fluid to do the lab test to see if there is any blood or microorganism. Okay, so to test if someone, you suspect that someone got meningitis, okay, infection in the meninges. Have you heard meningitis? So infection of the meninges. How many meninges you have? 3, right? Remember that? If any of those meninges gets infected by bacteria, then the bacteria will float in the fluid, cerebrospinal fluid, because you have fluid there, right? So if you can draw that fluid out and examine and find the bacteria there, then you can use the antibiotic to kill it. Is it clear? If any internal hemorrhage or bleeding occurs anywhere in the brain or in the spinal cord due to injury, okay, cerebrovascular disease, rupture of the blood vessel, bleeding occurs, right? If you examine that cerebrospinal fluid, you will be able to find the red blood cells or blood cells there. Is it clear? So that's why we need to test the cerebrospinal fluid if you suspect that someone might have internal hemorrhage, bleeding, or meningitis or infection in the brain. Now, that is called the lumbar puncture. We insert the needle through the back of the vertebral column, and where you have cerebrospinal fluid in subarachnoid space. You remember between arachnoid and pia mater you have that fluid. So we insert the needle in subarachnoid space and draw the cerebrospinal fluid. Now you tell me, you look here, the spinal cord ends here at lumbar 1 or lumbar 2. But the dura mater, arachnoid mater, pia mater, they continue all the way down. And the fluid also is present all the way down here. So that's why we insert the needle below lumbar 2. You have fluid there, but you don't have a spinal cord there. Make sense? Below lumbar 2, definitely spinal cord is not there, but fluid is there. So lumbar puncture is done at lower lumbar level, lower lumbar area. Is it clear?
It's the same place where they do the for labor with the truck.
Yeah, they actually want to numb these nerves. Yeah. Now, what we ask the patient to do we ask the patient to lie like sideways, like this, and turn the upper part of the body this way. So look at this. If this person turns the upper part forward, then these spinous processes open more. And you can easily, insert the needle through the back. You see there are openings between the spinous processes here. This is a big one. So we'll insert the needle and draw the cerebrospinal fluid. That is called the lumbar puncture. And it is safe. Lower lumbar area is safe because no spinal cord is in this part. Here, you see, this is the subarachnoid space where you have the cerebrospinal fluid. Okay. Only the nerve roots are here, no spinal cord. Okay, now, how many spinal nerves you have? Anybody? How many spinal nerves?
Type 2.
From both sides of the spinal cord, how many?
31 pairs.
31 pairs, yes. Okay. So, you have 31 pairs come out from both sides. And that's why you see you have the openings. So, through those openings, spinal nerves come out. Now, if I make a cross section, cut like this, and see a slice of the spinal cord, it will look like this. Okay, so this is a slice of the spinal cord. Now, the inner part of the spinal cord has a butterfly shaped structure. This part. This is called gray matter. So, inner part of the spinal cord is the gray matter, which looks like a butterfly. And outer part is called the white matter. White matter. Okay. Now, in each side of the gray matter, you have 3 horns, horn-like structures. If this is the front, ventral, this is back or dorsal. This is called the ventral horn. This is the dorsal horn. And this one is called lateral horn. So how many horns? 3 in each side of the gray matter. Is it clear? Same thing in the other side. Ventral horn, dorsal horn, and lateral horn. In each horn, you have group of neurons. In the ventral horn, you have the neurons. These are called motor neurons. So motor type neurons. In the dorsal horn, you have another group of neurons, and these are called sensory neurons. And in the lateral horn, you have another group of neurons. These are called autonomic So let's quickly review. Okay. So if you see inside the spinal cord, make a transverse section and see inside. The inner part looks like what? A butterfly. And that is called what? The gray matter. Is it clear? And around the gray matter, the outer part is white matter. It looks white. Is it clear? Okay. Now, in each half of the gray matter, how many horns you have? Three. Ventral horn in the front, dorsal horn in the back, and lateral horn. Lateral. Is it clear? And in three horns, you have three types of neurons. In the ventral horn, you have what kind of neurons? Motor. In the dorsal horn, sensory neurons. And in the lateral horn, autonomic neurons. Is it clear?
We know sensory and motor. What about that?
Second?
I said, you talked earlier about sensory and motor.
Yeah.
But then we want to know autonomic.
Autonomic, okay. Yeah, when we classified the nervous system, you remember, the motor could be two types, voluntary and involuntary. Voluntary motor goes, for example, from the brain to the skeletal muscle. You can voluntarily move your body parts. That is voluntary motor, right? Involuntary is autonomic. You remember I said? So, like secretion, salivary secretion.
Yes.
You don't do that, right? So that's why you need also autonomic neurons. Make sense? So that is another kind of function. Okay. Good. This is your skin. This is your muscle. Okay. Now, what happens if I touch your skin? Is that sensation, right? So that sensation will be taken from the skin to a round structure that is called dorsal root ganglion. And then the dorsal root ganglion is also filled with sensory neurons. Remember, everything in the back is sensory, right? These are sensory, these are sensory. So, from the skin, the signal will be sent to the dorsal root ganglion neurons. And then, from here, the signal will be sent to the dorsal horn. You have another set of sensory neurons here. Okay? So the touch signal will go from here to here, then from here to the dorsal horn, because these are sensory neurons. And then from here, the signal will go to the brain. Ascending tract. You remember that? Ascending tract will take the signal to the brain. And then the brain will send signal, the motor command, to the ventral horn neurons here, because these are motor. So descending tracts will bring the signal from the brain to the ventral horn neurons, okay, here. And from the ventral horn neurons, the signal will go directly to the muscles, okay. Now, one thing happens before they go to the muscle. I didn't show that one. Let me change here a little bit. So what happens before they go to the muscle? These two branches, they join together. They join together. united. Okay, and this is the spinal cord, spinal nerve. Spinal nerve. Okay, and then from the spinal nerve, two branches arise and like this. Okay, and go to the body wall. This is the body wall. Body wall. Okay. Now, this structure, the bundle of fibers, is called the ventral root. And this bundle of fibers is called dorsal root. Everything in the back is dorsal, front is ventral. Okay. So now let's quickly review. If I touch the skin, from the skin, the signal will come to the spinal nerve, which is short, and will then go to the dorsal root, and will be taken to the dorsal root ganglion. There is a round structure in the dorsal root that is called the ganglion, and since it is in dorsal root, it is called dorsal root ganglion. You have sensory neurons there. They will receive that touch signal, sensory signal, and will give to another group of neurons located in the dorsal horn. These are also sensory neurons. And then through the ascending tract, signal will be taken to the brain. And this is sensory signal, right? Sensory signal. And then the brain will process that signal, and through the descending tract, which is motor, the signal will come to the ventral horn motor neurons. So these are motor neurons. And will go towards the body wall through the ventral root. So this way. And this signal goes this way. So sensory is towards the central nervous system, motor out from the central nervous system. Okay. So this is sensory, and this way is motor. Okay. This is motor, this is sensory. The last thing you need to know is these two branches are called ramus. So this is ventral ramus, and this is dorsal ramus. Now you see, it's not really difficult. Everything in the back is dorsal, everything in the front is what? Ventral. Make sense? So all these names start with ventral. This is what? Ventral horn. This is what? Ventral root. This is what? Ventral ramus. Is it clear? This is what? Dorsal horn. Dorsal root. Dorsal ramus. Make sense? Now, one thing is very important here. You see, if I ask you, the dorsal root carries what kind of signal? Sensory or motor? Sensory. Make sense? If I ask you, ventral root carries what kind of signal? Motor. So now you tell me, simple question, if I touch, that signal will go through ventral or dorsal root?
Dorsal.
Dorsal, very good. Because sensory, right? Towards the brain. Then through the ascending tract, right? To the brain. Now, brain will send motor command through the descending tract, right? And the signal will be received by the ventral horn neurons, motor neurons, right? And then through ventral root. Now you tell me, ventral root will take the signal to the skin or to the muscle? Because movement, motor. Motor controls the muscle, not the skin. Skin cannot move the body part. Is it clear? So, from the skin, the signal, sensory signal, will travel through the dorsal pathway to the brain, and from the brain, the motor will go to the muscle through the ventral pathway. Now, one thing very important happens here. If I ask you, this short spinal nerve that just comes out through this intervertebral foramen and then divides into ramus and go to the body wall. Go to the body wall. Now, if I ask you, spinal nerve contains what kind of fibers? Sensory or motor or both? Both. Is it clear? Because both are joining. This is sensory, this is motor, right? Together forming the spinal nerve. So spinal nerve is a mixed nerve. Mixed type nerve. Neither motor, neither purely sensory. Is it clear? So how many spinal nerves you have? Again?
31 pairs.
31 pairs. This is just one of those, right? Same thing will happen in this side. 31. Okay? Like this. I have just shown you one slice. Okay? So this is how the spinal nerve is formed and how the roots, horns, those structures work. Now if I ask you in your exam, draw and show me, okay, how the spinal nerve is formed. You will draw this whole thing. Okay? Not difficult.
No.
Okay. You know how many horns are there, how many roots are there, right? And what kind of neurons are there, which way the signal will go. So you know all those things. Just practice. Okay. Okay, now we'll see. You see, this is the butterfly-shaped gray matter. Okay, this is the ventral horn, dorsal horn. If you look this picture, is better. It's the ventral horn, dorsal horn, and lateral horn. Okay. Now, outer part is the white matter, and in the white matter you have those tracts. You remember I said ascending and descending tracts? Those are located in the white matter. And ascending tracts are sensory, shown by blue color here, and descending tracts are motor, shown by red colors. That's why you see two colors, ascending and descending. Ascending are sensory, descending are what? Motor. Is it clear? Okay. Now, I'll just mention few names of important tracts. First, one thing if you remember, it will be easy to know which one is sensory, which one is motor. Sensory tracts start with the word spino. Starts with what?
Spine.
Spino. Like spinothalamic, spinocerebellar. And motor tracts end with spinal. Okay, so this is a trick. So motor tracts end with what?
Spine.
The word spinal. So if I ask you cortico-spinal tract, cortico-spinal tract, is it sensory or motor? Motor, because ending with
Spine.
spinal. If I ask you spinothalamic,
Sensor.
sensory. Also, if you think this way, thalamus is in your brain, right? So if I say spinothalamic, that means going that way, right? Towards the brain. Cerebellum is in the brain. So if I say spinocerebellar, that means going upwards, right? Sensory. And corticospinal, vestibulospinal, ending in the spinal cord, right? Coming from the brain. So those are model. One important sensory tract is spinothalamic. Spinothalamic tract carries important sensory signals, pain and temperature. So spinothalamic tract, this is important one. There are two in each side. You see, this is ventral and this is lateral. So ventral is spinothalamic, lateral spinothalamic. Same in this side. So they carry pain